Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. We are back here in studio with a very special guest today. This is our first in-studio guest that we've had here on the ITR Live podcast, and I am honored to welcome to the show my good friend, Senate Majority Leader Jack Whitver. Greetings and welcome.
I am very excited to be here, Chris.
I can tell.
I'm a loyal listener. I'm a subscriber. I'm just new into the podcast world, so there's about 3 or 4 I listen to every week, and this is one of them. So,
all right,
happy to be here.
Well, that's great. I think for most of our listeners, I don't know that the introductions are all that meaningful. I think most folks out there listening know who you are and what you've been working on. But what's really cool, not just that we're friends, that we've served together, and all of that, but we share a lot of the same priorities, which for our organization is tax policy. And I know that's been really important to you over the course of your legislative career. So I'm going to ask you a really simple question that we've tried to answer here. Why is tax policy important?
Well, I mean, everyone always tells us, whenever, I've been pushing for tax reform for 12 years. I've been in the Senate 12 years, and day one, I'm like, we need to get down to where we are talking about eliminating the income tax. And for years, people laugh at you and say, that's just not what we do in Iowa. And they say, well, so we want to be competitive. People are moving to Florida, they're moving to Tennessee, they're moving to Arizona and Texas. And everyone always says, well, they have mountains, they have beaches, they have warm weather. And I'm just like, you can't not have the beaches and mountains and have the highest tax rate. Like, you have to compete somewhere. Right. And it's all about competition. People are moving based on tax decisions, and whether that's a business moving, whether that's people moving, people retire, or they just decide they don't want to pay 9% income tax anymore in Iowa. So it's all about competition to me, making Iowa the most competitive place we can possibly make it, so that we can grow and continue to have an environment, an atmosphere, a state where we can raise our kids and our grandkids.
Well, absolutely. And I think while it's incredibly exciting to have somebody championing that, is the results that come with it are equally encouraging. So, you and I served together and actually kind of got started on this process together back in 2018. And then it got really exciting once I left. So, like, a little bit of the background, which we've talked about here on the podcast before in these series of tax bills culminating in the big one last year, but talk a little bit about where we've come to, and then some of the challenges along the way of trying to get there.
Yeah, I don't think it's hyperbole to say Iowa had one of the, if not the worst tax code in America 10 years ago. And it was decades of people that wouldn't make a tough decision to actually reform taxes. And so whenever someone would complain about high taxes, they'd come in, they'd offer a tax credit or a tax exemption, try to eliminate any pressure that might build, and just take the easy way out. And we had one of the worst tax codes in the country. And so to undo the worst tax code that was put in place over decades, it takes time. And that's why it was so important to start this process as soon as we got the trifecta, the Republican trifecta, back in 2017. And so we passed our first bill in 2018, and everyone said, oh, you're going to bankrupt this state and you can't do it. You're going to be Kansas. But we kept chipping away. And we also controlled spending. Funded priorities, but we didn't overspend. But then we're able to come back with the 2021 and 2022 tax cuts that have put us on the map nationally now as one of the great tax reform states.
Yeah. You go to a lot of events across the country and talk to these leaders from other states, and we do too, kind of in think tank world. And it's really easy to claim that, just how significant Iowa is. And it keeps coming back to us, like, how did you get so far? And you touched on an important point too, that we've started to work on, is the budget side of things. Is that this is all made possible because of the fiscal conservatism and the stewardship of the state budget. And that this isn't the finish line either. I know that you've talked about that in the past, how important it is going forward to hold the line on spending.
Yeah, I mean, I do go to a lot of conferences, and this summer I've spent a lot of time talking to other state leaders about tax reform. And everyone wants to talk about the actual tax reform, but I often tell people the appropriation side or the spending side is just as important, if not more important. And because people expect us to fund priorities, and they expect us to invest in areas that need investment with our state dollars. But we got to be careful not to overspend, because then everything you do on the tax side, it doesn't work. And so it's a balance. Like everything you do in life, you have to balance it. And that's where I think we've done a terrific job over the last 5-6 years. Is, back in 2017, we inherited a deficit, and largely because we had a Senate Democrat caucus that overspent. And you were in the House at the time, and you remember those battles over spending. And we inherited that deficit. We got it turned around, working with the House and the governor. And now we're running the largest surpluses ever, which means there's a lot of options on the table when you're looking to reform taxes, but also looking to make sure we continue to invest in things that make Iowa the best state in the country.
No, I think that's right. And revenues continue to come in strong. And there's going to be the temptation, and you know this very well in the legislature, to start spending some of those dollars. And there will be projects. I mean, we all know that there's important things that government does, but just making sure that we focus on the needs and staying away from the wants as much as possible.
Well, that's it. It's a change in culture, and House Republicans really started this back in 2011. When Governor Branstad came back as governor, the House took the majority at the Capitol, and they started to change the conversation. You started to change the conversation about not spend everything you can, but how much do we actually need to spend to move the state forward? And, it went from a conversation of you can spend up to 99% constitutional limitation to, okay, we're not going to spend any more than ongoing. Then it's like, we're not going to spend more than 99% of ongoing. And now it's just like, what do we need to spend? What do we need to spend, and what investments do we need to make? And it's probably going to be in the low 90% of what we bring in. But we think it's really important to be good stewards of the taxpayer dollar. And part of that means giving back the taxpayer dollar, the taxpayers' money that we overcollect.
Well, a lot of progress has been made. You touched on the income tax, eliminating the inheritance tax, made some progress on reforming corporate taxes and some of the credits. And yet we still are on pace to continue to collect too many tax dollars in the state of Iowa. So what? And I'm not asking you to necessarily preview next year, but what's next?
Well, I've often said, as long as we're in the majority in the Iowa Senate, and as long as I'm leader, we're going to continue on tax reform. And so part of that is the last tax bill that we just passed is a 4-year phase-in. So we really have to watch that and make sure that revenues are coming in to make sure that tax bill is successful. That's going to be our legacy, and it has to work. And that means we have to continue to control spending. But what we're hearing a lot now, as we talk to Iowans, is about property tax. And people are getting their assessments. Often they're going up 20% or more. And people are worried about what that means for their local property tax bill. And so that's something that our Senate Ways and Means Chair Dan Dawson, I've talked to him about really diving into property taxes and see what we can do from a state level to actually try to reform property taxes.
Yeah. And I know that one thing that some of your members talked to you about, and in fact, I talked to some of them about, was when you delivered relief on the county mental health levy, is that sometimes that wasn't passed on. In fact, in a lot of places, it wasn't passed on. And so I know that's also going to be something that you guys are looking at as you find ways to deliver property tax relief.
Yeah, absolutely. We passed the mental health levy bill, took it into the state, and we hoped and expected all the counties to pass that on. And through the good work that you guys do, you guys have the chart, and you can click on any county in the state and see if your county supervisors actually pass that on. And you would know probably better numbers, but it seemed like about half would pass that on,
right,
and half didn't. And so, but ultimately, that's what property taxes really come back to, is decisions at the local level. And you have to continue to talk to city councils, to your school board members, to your county supervisors, and make sure they know property tax are important to you, because often they fly under the radar and they can do whatever they want, the local property taxes. They often blame the legislature. These are local taxes, and we need to make sure we hold locals accountable.
Yeah. I think one thing that when I talk either about the issue or with locals is that, for the past decade, the state specifically over the last 6 years, the legislature has done an admirable job of holding the line on spending and separating wants versus needs, and then being in a position to honor the taxpayer because of that. And it's time for more of that spirit at the local level in Iowa, is really holding a line on how much they spend. And maybe they don't need the new aquatic center. And then let's go ahead and figure out a way to protect property taxpayers. And this is going to be my segue, I guess, to kind of the back half of our conversation, is that my sense is, from being out and talking to candidates, is that if you get out and talk to Iowa voters right now on the doorstep, property taxes is going to be one of the one thing they bring up, right?
Absolutely.
So, that's going to be something that your members are going to take forward.
Oh, yeah.
I'm assuming into the next legislative
Like
session.
I said, we're always going to talk about taxes and tax reform, and that's the one that right now is urgent for taxpayers and our constituents. But it's also, we've almost been alternating back and forth. Okay, what can we do on property taxes one year? Next year, come back with income tax, and we're kind of at that property tax phase right now. But there's a lot of things that our people are hearing at the doors. Largely, they want change from what they're seeing out in Washington D.C. Yeah. And I often tell people, and I used to say this as a joke, but it's becoming more of a reality. It's pretty easy to lead right now because all you have to do is watch and see what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are doing, and just do the exact opposite. And I used to say that as a joke, but if you think about it, they're running $1 trillion deficits. We're running $1 billion surpluses. Yeah. They're raising taxes wherever they can. We're cutting taxes wherever we can. They want to take the federal government to take control of your kids' education. We want to give it back to you. And so it's just a very clear difference right now, and voters are responding. So I'm really excited. I think we're 29 days away. I couldn't be more excited for November 8th to get here.
So let's shift gears into this election. So right now, your caucus, and I guess maybe to set the stage for listeners, that I think they're probably familiar with who you are, but what your role is in Senate elections across the state of Iowa. So what is your role in that process?
I mean, I basically lead the Senate Majority Fund. And so we raise money, we put the money together, the finances together, and then put the campaigns together to make sure that we not only hold a majority, but build our majority. And so, long story short, I'm in charge of running every single Senate campaign across the state. And that sounds like a daunting task, and it is at times, but there's only a handful of competitive ones, right? And so you're really focused on, between 6 and 10 or 6 and 12 when the cycle starts, and that gets winnowed down as you go along to where now, there's about 5 to 7 races that we're really, really paying a lot of attention to right now.
So, we obviously tax policy is important here, whether it's the bills you've done or looking ahead at property taxes. But what are the issues that you and your candidates are talking about, whether it's on the doorstep, mail, TV, however, what are the issues that you're trying to communicate to Iowans in this campaign? I
mean, a couple. I think there's 3 big issues. Number one, by far, is inflation in the economy. People are angry, they're frustrated, they're worried about where this economy is going. And so we need to highlight what we're doing at the state level to try to combat that, whether it's reducing taxes, controlling spending. And in some ways it's difficult because, in my opinion, we've done everything right at the state level. So try to go promote that is what we want to do, but people don't always feel it because of the bad decisions in D.C. So drawing that contrast of who do you trust to handle the economy better and handle inflation better, we have to make that case. So that's number one. But we're also hearing a lot about public safety, safe streets, illegal immigration. That is a really hot topic right now. We're going to continue to talk about taxes. And then finally, education is a really big issue right now too. So those are the things that we have been focused on the most.
Yeah, I read an interesting quote this morning. I don't want to ask you to respond to it, but it was a AP national article about how it seems that Democrats, that the only thing they want to litigate this election on is on the issue of life and abortion. And because I had a James Carville quote in an earlier episode, but this was his comment in this article, is that the fear among Democrats that it's not working for them to just constantly try and beat that drum. And he said a lot of these consultants think that if all we do is run abortion spots, that will win for us. I don't think so. And he went on, but if you just sit there and they're pummeling you on crime and on the cost of living, you've got to be more aggressive than just yelling abortion every other word. And I think the underlying idea there is that they're not speaking to these issues that affect everyday Americans and everyday Iowans, which is in the face of Biden's economy, is that it's inflation. And it's not just the price of gas. It's at the grocery store. It's these staple items that we're paying vast amounts of money more than we did before. And it's crime and these things where specifically you and your members have led on those issues and have a great story to tell Iowans. And so I think that my sense is Iowans especially, but Americans in general, are very receptive to that message of what actually matters at the kitchen table.
Yep, absolutely. And a lot of it is reminding, there's two things. It's reminding voters what we have done to help them, but also going forward, what are we going to continue to do? But we are continuing to remind voters of what the governor and the legislature have done over the last 2 years, starting with, it sounds even crazy to talk about that this was a hot issue 2 years ago. But 2 years ago today, we are promising we're going to get your kids in school. And it sounds wild that was even an issue, but we got our kids back in school, one of only 2 states to pass a bill to do that. We also promised we're going to support our police. We passed one of the most comprehensive Back the Blue bills in the entire country. And then we promised we were going to be good fiscal stewards and we're going to return that money. And so we have done all those things to try to help the average family. And there's a lot of important issues out there, but the one that people are feeling every single day, as you mentioned, when they go to the grocery store, when they fill up their gas tank, it's inflation. And the National Democrats have absolutely ruined our economy with how they have reacted to the COVID pandemic. And the overspending that they have done, pumping trillions into the economy, has absolutely ruined our country. And so I'm sure they do want to talk about abortion and make that the only issue. But that's because they have nothing else to run on right now, and we have won on every single other issue that people care about when you do the average poll.
Yeah, that's right. So you said that the field is getting a little narrower, and so right now the balance of power in the state Senate is 32-18, correct?
Yep.
And so my guess is you feel pretty good about growing that majority right now, but walk through some of those. 3, 4, 5 targeted races where you're spending a lot of your time and energy, and where what you see happening in those races.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, from a high level, we're at 32-18, and a super majority in the Iowa Senate is 34. It's been over 50 years since either party has had a super majority in the Iowa Senate. And so there's a lot of people that are like, I don't want to make predictions. I want to make predictions. I want to set the goal out there for our caucus and our members. We're going after that supermajority. We want to be the first ones in 50 years to get there. And that means setting high goals and going for it. And if you come up short, you come up short. But I feel really, really good that if the election were today, we would get that supermajority and probably even get up to 35. And so really that's my target is 34, 35. And that means we have to go pick up 3 seats. If you put everything together, and why am I so optimistic? There's a lot of things. Well, we just talked about the national environment, the national mood. We have a new map which favors Republicans, and you probably pick up a seat or so just by the new map. Yeah. Top of the ticket is fantastic. Governor Reynolds is running extremely strong. Chuck Grassley is running strong. They're both going to be very successful, and they're putting in place the organization. And from running campaigns forever, that's everything. The organization means so much, and we have a governor and a U.S. senator that are investing in Iowa and building that organization out. We have great quality of candidates. We have the fundraising advantage. So all those things, probably the 5 most important things you talk about, we're winning all of them. And so I feel really good and optimistic about where we're at. But then you have to go down to the individual races, which is what you asked about. So I'll answer that. Yeah. Probably the most competitive seats are still in the Polk County area. I mean, and that has been ground zero for the last 6 years. I mean, that as Polk County goes, so do the majorities or the statewide tickets. We have Mike Buslow running in Ankeny against a newcomer on the Democrat side. Mike has been 1 year in the state house, and with redistricting got put together, so he's running in Ankeny. But he is knocking more doors than almost any other candidate. Him and Don Driscoll are probably the 2 hardest knockers, but they're knocking their butts off, and they're getting out there and doing the work. And so I feel really good about that. And so Mike has a competitive one up in Ankeny. Jake Chapman is running against another incumbent Democrat. They got put together in redistricting. And again, we're doing the work we need to win these races, and that's a seat that at the legislative level, Republicans have been very successful. That seat didn't vote for Donald Trump, but they did vote for a lot of Republican legislative candidates. So I feel fairly good about that seat as well.
Yeah, as a fellow veteran of running Central Iowa, competitive suburban legislative races, I think both of those candidates are in a very good position to come out on top, and so it's great. It speaks well of just the record that they put in place, that you and your members have put in place to run on, and I think it's got to be empowering that you run these bills, you run all these things that you're running on now, and you're told, well, it's too much, voters don't want this, and yet here you are, coming back around to face the voters of Iowa, and you're going to grow your majority off of it.
Yeah.
So clearly you're on the right path.
Yeah.
And that's maybe my editorial comment on it. But
I appreciate that. And that's really my job as leader, your job when you were leader in the House, is to put forward the agenda that Iowa voters will respond to. And if you look at the ads and what Democrats are running on versus what we're running on, that agenda that we have passed over the last 2 to 6 years, that is what we're running on. And voters are responding. And Democrats aren't really pushing back on any of that, as far as getting the kids in the classroom, supporting our police. If you watch the TV right now, Cindy Axne acting like a Republican. She's talking about her and Chuck Grassley working together, and I think that tells you a lot about the mood that is out there right now.
Right. Yeah. You and your members are running on your record of accomplishment, and Democrats are running on your record.
They're running away from their votes.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's good. Well, we're out of time because Leader Whitver has reminded us he likes the length of the show, and so we want to honor that. But you heard it here. Senate Majority Leader Jack Whitver is a fan of the show. He's a subscriber, and you all should be too. So before we close, I wanted to thank you for coming in.
Very happy to be here. Honored to be the first guest in the history of the show.
Can we maybe look forward to having you back at some point?
I would love to come back sometime.
All right. Wonderful. All right. Well, that's all the time we have for today. So thank you for joining us here on ITR Live. Don't forget to be a fellow subscriber, give us a 5-star review, and tell your friends. And with that all having been said, we will see you next time.